Good evening, one and all. For those of you who know me, we meet again. For those who do not, I am pleased to make your acquaintance. Dalton Mills, proprietor of the Cabinet of Curiosities, wherein I have collected many strange exhibits which, for a donation, you may come and visit and learn and be educated and perhaps even amused and even frightened. You think not? One of my finest exhibits is the very one preserved head of that wicked Republican regicide, old Noll, Oliver Cromwell himself. You may wonder at it, for it is a marvel of the age. How came this item to me? Did it fall into my lap from the sky? No. Let me tell you a little of the story of the so-called High Protector. Now, he it was who instigated the overthrow and execution of good King Charles I, though he could be a little bit obstinate as a king, but kings can be so. And after having him executed, Oliver Cromwell made himself High Protector of the English Republic, and all royalty was abashed and disowned in England. Yet he did not endure and enjoy it too long before fate took a hand and punished him, and he died in 1658. His republic did not last long. 2 years later, Charles II returned to England to acclaim, and one of his first acts as king was to have the body of Oliver Cromwell, which had been buried in Westminster Abbey, the sleeping abode of our kings of England. There, a commoner. It is beyond belief. But anyway, Charles II had his body brought forth and had it hanged at Tyburn like a common criminal. And common criminal he was, for he had thieved a throne. And after it had been hanged a while, and for the carrying crows to peck away at his face and its eyes, the head was separated from the shoulders and impaled upon a spike which was set above Westminster Hall for all Londoners and Englishmen to see the most assured and deserved fate of would-be republicans. The head remained on the spike for many years, and the birds and the insects all taking their little bits of it. And then, in a great storm, the spike was knocked down, and the head disappeared. Nobody knows where. Some say it was salted away by secret Republicans, hoping that one day a republic would return to England. Others said it was cast about here and there, exchanged, bought, bartered for, as some sideshow freak. But I know different. It was spirited away to France. There it was secretly kept by the kings of France over many years, so that they might look at it in their secrecy and laugh and mock the republican folly that had befallen England. Yet French, being foolish, it worked its malign influence upon France, and years later, riot, revolution, anarchy and terror came to France, and they in their turn executed their own king. And what was the result? A new High Protector emerged in France, a tyrant king, the Corsican ogre Bonaparte, who waged war on Europe for nigh on 20 years, only to be defeated at long last by a Great Britain, the Duke of Wellington. And the head, Cromwell's head, disappeared again. But riot and revolution did not leave France. Kings were overthrown, and a new president of the French Republic, one Louis Philippe Bonaparte, nephew of the Corsican ogre and tyrant. He became president of France, and like any would-be Bonapartist dictator, declared himself emperor. Now it may come as a surprise, but I have actually known this man and had dealings with him. And he knew of the secret keeping of Cromwell's head. And because he knew me, he sent Cromwell's preserved's head into my safekeeping, so that as long as I kept it, France would no longer be on its malevolent, malicious, Republican influence, and he could continue as the second French Bonaparte emperor, and I keep this head safely, for I am strong in constitution and patriotism, and I am not one to give in to the Republican impulse. So if you come to my cabinet of curiosities, you might well see for yourself with your own eyes the preserved head of old Noel, Oliver Cromwell. And now, other exhibits I have, but one choice exhibit I wanted more than any other. But it was not to be. It was no item preserved in a jar. It was a living man and his son. Now I had heard of a wonder that was displayed in the Music Metro Hall in London, in Edgware Road, and I went there to see Andrian and his son Fodor, the Russian dogmen from the wastes of the steppes. Well, he did not actually come from the steppes, but he did come from the vast expanses of Russia. And when I saw him, he was, I suppose one would say, a typical Russian man of that time. He was short, wide, not fat, but wide, sturdy, very well built, possibly of peasant stock. His eyes were somewhat yellow, I must say, very, and his skin, it had that greyish tinge, you know, that skin gets on a corpse before it begins to rot before your very eyes. And his son was the same. And they were called the Dogmen. And why? Because all of their face was covered in hair, so close and so tight and wiry, you would think they were like a human Yorkshire Terrier. Such was the hair in its nature. Apparently, so I was led to believe, when he was in Russia, good old Andrian, he was a very devout and Christian man, following the faith of the Russian Greek Orthodox Church. Nothing wrong in that, that's what they do there. But there were many people who, common as peasanty types I think, who believed he was the spawn of the devil. So Andrian took all his money, gave it to some Greek Orthodox monks who lived in the city of Krustama, which is on the conjunction of the two great rivers, the Krustama and the Volga. And there they made prayers and psalms to heal him and to make all this facial hair disappear. To no effect. And so he fell in with some charlatan, some mountebank, and he was displayed around the capitals of Europe, in St. Petersburg, capital of Russia, in Berlin, in Paris, and many flocked to see him and paid much money in doing so. So I went to see him and I thought, well, I could do this fellow a lot better justice if I were to have him in my cabinet of curiosities and not display him round the country as some fairground freak. Another thing I noticed though, which worried me, he liked to drink, strong drink, and before my very eyes on the stage, I saw him consume an entire pint of strong vodka. I followed his progress, and not long after, for 10 days, he was on display in Liverpool, and I thought to approach him and make him an offer to join my cabinet of curios. And it was while I was there in the audience, unhatted of course, because it was very warm, he reached out, pointed into the audience, and he said, "Look, see that man there, that bald man with no hair? How much better for the both of us would it be if some of the hair of my face was transferred onto his head?" Oh, the audience did love it. But I was that bald man sat there, and I loved it not, and I had to quickly make my exit, enduring much mirth and contempt and ridicule from the good people of Liverpool. I left it some time, and I hoped to approach him again to make him an offer to join my cabinet of curiosities. But sadly he died not long after that appearance in Liverpool. Apparently the strong drink took its effect. So I thought, well, if I cannot have the dog man of Russia, maybe I could have the dog boy, his son, Fodor. But his son took issue in grief and left this land, crossed the oceans to the Americas. And the last I heard, he was being displayed in some common American freak show, doing quite successfully as I believe he's made quite some wealth out of it. That was one exhibit that slipped my grasp. But so you do not think I am necessarily always mercenary and looking to display the poor unfortunates cursed by nature to my own profit. I do have attributes which I once shared with some of the greatest minds in the kingdom, and I met one of them, and her name was Lady Ava Constance. She was the only legitimate daughter of that debauched Lord Byron and his wife, Lady Wentworth. He did have many children, but it would not be discreet to speak of the circumstances. And Lady Ava was well brought up and had all those qualities that one would expect in a lady. But she also had the most sharpest of minds and intellects. And just as her father had been known as a great man of prose and poetry and all other derogatory attributes, her mind was equally as large and inquiring into science and calculation. And as a young lady, she used to attend many a science and mathematical lecture in the great city of London, as did I, because I also had a great interest in such things, for my cabinet of curiosities is built on such. And I met her once when she was in conversation with a certain Mr. Charles Babbage, who would always go on and on about creating what he called a difference engine, a machine for the calculation of numbers, of sums and multiplications and divisions and divides, and it was a lot to take in. But in my discussions and correspondence too with Lady Ava Lovelace, I discovered that she also had an interest in calculation and science, and that she was and had been since the age of 17 well schooled in mathematics. Her mother, Lady Wentworth, had employed many tutors of differing disciplines. In fact, as I remember, she once eloped with one of them. She was very precocious as a child, and very beautiful. Well, we corresponded, and she revealed to me that she believed she could make what she called an analytical engine, a machine similar to that of Mr. Charles Babbage, which were calculations and things, but superior. And she hoped that it would create an algorithm, which is a mathematical term, with which she could use to be a much more successful gambler. Because, like her father, Lord Byron, she had one or two degenerate attributes, and she loved to gamble. And some days she would win lots of money, and some days she would lose enormous amounts, and she could find herself constantly in debt, which was a great worry to her husband, the 8th Baron King. And even though he had many estates in Scotland and England, he was always having to pay her debts and her creditors, who were forever chasing her around England. Well, I'm led to believe that in my correspondence and meetings and discussions with her, that Lady Ava Lovelace did find a great, how can I put this, respect for my mathematical intellect and scientific inquiries. And from this, I believe this grew to a great affection, which she nurtured for many years. But unfortunately, before she even got to the age of 40, she took ill, very poorly, very badly, with no hope of salvation. And on her deathbed, with her husband in attendance, as he had been for many weeks, she made a certain confession to him, which gave him such consternation that he abandoned her, and he left her to die many weeks later on her own. Much speculation has been made about what could have been said and what confession. She had debts. She liked the young men. But I suspect the one thing that she nurtured in her breast was her affection and unrequited love for myself, Dalton Mills. And if you wanted to know more about my adventures here and there, the things I have seen, the things I have learned, the things I have collected, then you must come this Saturday and Sunday, the 25th and 26th of November, to Ulverston Town, where you will find me in the Victorian Alley, where, by offering a donation to the gatekeeper, you may gain entrance to the Victorian Alley and the Cabinet of Curiosities. I hope to see you there.